Hello everyone. Can you hear me? I mean, it's a small enough room. You should be able to hear me. Okay, good morning.
Morning.
So I'm Leela Prasad. I'm professor in the Department of Religious Studies. Welcome to today's talk. I'd like to begin by thanking the Humanities Unbounded Initiative at Duke, which is funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. My thanks in particular to Nicole. Where are you? Nicole Gallia. Yeah, for a fantastic work in making the humanities labs, especially in this initiative, possible. I'll say more about that in a minute. And welcome, big welcome, especially to Erin Parrish. Dr. Parrish is the executive director of Human Kindness Foundation, a nonprofit organization that promotes spirituality, mindfulness, and wellness in prisons and jails. She has a PhD in cultural anthropology and a master's in history from Duke and an MPhil in conflict resolution and reconciliation from Trinity College, Dublin. Her research has focused on the physicality of memory and the psychology of place, especially in post conflict reconstruction. She has 20 years of experience working with people trying to rebuild their lives and communities in the aftermath of war and incarceration. And you can see how much more of Erin's we need today. Erin's compassion and deep sense of justice is visible in her work across the world. She has worked with victims and combatants of violence in Colombia and Northern Ireland. Here in North Carolina, she has designed peer support re entry programs and transitional jobs and programs for people coming out of prison. She has also worked on driver's license restoration programs to help people avoid incarceration. I came to know Erin through a shared interest in carceral visual art, creative writing, and education. I was interested through my teaching of Gandhi at the Federal Correctional Facility in Patna in how Gandhian nonviolence stimulates a new restorative self-imagination in prison setting. I found Erin's everyday work suffused with passion and diligence, absolutely inspiring. Over coffees at Mad Hatters, you know those. We talked about collaborating. Our first collaboration has been supported by a Humanities Unbounded lab called Asia in the Making of American Religiosity that I co directed with my colleagues in religious studies, Richard Jaffe and Anna Sun. Between 2021 and 2023, through courses, fieldwork projects, book readings, discussions, guest speakers, and workshops, the lab's undergraduate and graduate fellows explored how the idea of Asia transforms or defines American religious imagination, things like goddess worship and yoga, Buddhist meditation, what have you. Erin worked closely with Ishrit Gupta, Anna Masido, and Gargi Sahasrabudhe, three undergraduate students from my fall 2022 class on sovereignty and storytelling, which Miriam Cook, you visited and spoke about your work in Damascus in Syria. We had read William Mecca Elmore and Susan Simone's co-authored book, Prison from the Inside Out, from one man's journey from a life sentence to freedom, which was published by Human Kindness Foundation in 2021. The collaboration between Duke students and Human Kindness Foundation for over a year and a half under Erin's wonderful mentorship and vision, and I must say persistence, created a spectacular archive. Today's talk, The Fires We Never Lost, Finding Art, Poetry, and Performance in 50 Years of Prison Letters, is the subject of this collaboration, is what this collaboration wider archive. Over to you, Erin. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's great to see so many friends and family. You know, Leela and I both brought our family, so that's great. It's family affair. And I really just want to thank Leela for being such a wonderful, gracious, and generous collaborator. When we first met at Mad Hatter, we were like, we must have known each other forever. So I hope that this is just the first of many future collaborations. And it's great to be hosted by FHI. I wrote my dissertation here, so I got many cups of free coffee and lots of free food here. So this is just like the first of many talks I would have to give to repay FHI. So I hope you're ready for 172 talks. The amount of food and drink I easily owe FHI. It's great to be here today. So my name's Erin Parrish. I'm the Executive Director of Human Kindness Foundation, and we create, curate, and distribute free resources, and we conduct workshops on mindfulness, spirituality, and wellness in prisons and jails. And all of our work is designed for and with justice-impacted and justice-involved audiences. We work to create community behind and beyond bars, and our work works to help people to see and free themselves. We've been around for 50 years. We started in 1973, and when we first started, our mission was really clear. It was, and hopefully it still is, but it was about building community with people who were incarcerated, largely through answering letters. People would write us, and we would write back. And they're still writing us, and we're still writing back 50 years later. We get hundreds of letters a month, so that's thousands of letters a year, and we have some wonderful volunteers and our founder and spiritual director here who answer these letters and know what it means to build community behind so many different barriers of culture, race, gender, life experience, and to say that we can build community is really the core of why we're here and what we do. So the first 6 years that we were around, it was primarily writing these letters. And in 1979, we started putting out a newsletter, and the letters were also core to the newsletter. So since 1979, we have easily sent out over 1 million newsletters. We currently send 20,000 newsletters to incarcerated readers 3 times a year. We also have created 6 books, and a lot of these books also have those letters as a foundational piece of the books. All of these books are interfaith about spirituality, mindfulness, and wellness, and we also distribute other books that are mainly around contemplative practices, some interfaith. We distribute Pema Chodron's books, so we have Buddhist contemplative practices. We also distribute Christian contemplative books with Prison Contemplative Fellowship. And I think that was all for this one. Great, yeah. So we also now distribute content on tablets. So for about the past 2 years, I've been collaborating with Adobo, which is a free educational app that's on about tablets in about 350 prisons and jails. And so that allows us to put a variety of different work up. You know, we can put podcasts. We actually have Omid Safi's podcast, Radical Love, on there. We have different videos and documentaries from Prison Contemplative Fellowship. So that's really open what we're able to distribute. And since we've been doing that, our content's been accessed over 100,000 times in 2 years. So we also have been conducting workshops in prisons and jails from the beginning. I'd say we really started with letters and workshops. So going in and doing workshops on mainly mindfulness and yoga, but also we've done all kinds of stuff. We've brought concerts into prisons. We've had magic shows. We've sent in the clowns. We've done a lot of stuff. Since between 2015 and 2020, we had a mindfulness group on Central Prison's death row, and currently we have a mindfulness group since 2022 at Orange Correctional in Hillsborough. And we largely operate on a gift economy. I think. Oh, yeah. So we give gifts to people. People write us and we send them books back. And oftentimes we send them books back with little handwritten cards, sometimes from our founder who's been writing these cards for 50 years, from volunteers. And they write back, right? It doesn't end there. There's a circular relationship of reciprocity that makes us who we are. And oftentimes when people are requesting books, they'll create this really beautiful envelope art, which is just amazing. Sometimes they use the stamps as part of the art. So a lot of times we get artwork. We have over 1,000 pieces of digitized art that we've received, but we've received so many more. People will, of course, write letters, but they'll write poetry, memoirs, manifestos. They will send stamps and sugar packets, coffee packets. Some of my personal favorites, this cat-themed daily planner that I think Darrell sent me. And he said, "Hi, Erin, if this doesn't make you smile, nothing will." I was having a bad play. And this little cat showed up and I used him for a couple months and I lost him and I found him. Great. But it's a relationship of reciprocity that I think is really core to what we do. And this painting is just one of my most favorite gifts that we've received. It came from an artist in Texas. He goes by Proficient in Knowledge, PIK. And he's a wonderful poet. He is just a really deep thinker. He actually got accepted to the TIP program at Duke when he was 12 and wasn't able to do that because of his family circumstances. And so his path led to prison, and my path leads to graduate school, which I think says a lot about race, class, gender, and the equality of the human spirit and the inequality of the world that we live in. But PIK is amazing, and he gifted this to Sita Lozoff, our founder, in honor of a story in a book that we had written called The Saddest Buddha, and we splash it everywhere. It was on our invitations to our 50th anniversary. It was on calendars. I sent them to his mom. His mom cried. This is what we do, is to have the relationship not end with the book. Okay, so we have, not yet. So what I'm going to talk about today are 3 new pieces of work that we created largely in collaboration with Duke students who were just amazing help to make all of this possible. The first is 50 Days of Kindness, which is a series of 50 daily reflections drawing from the writing and the artwork that we have received from people in prisons and jails over the past 50 years. The second is a new play called Together Apart that we collaborated with Hidden Voices Collective to use 50 years of the letters that people had written us and our responses to create a new play. And Dancing in a Sky of Kindness, which is a collaborative poem written with 52 incarcerated authors and 1 North Carolina poet laureate, Jackie Shelton Green, who we also have the honor to be our board chair. So those were all done in honor of our 50th anniversary. And so I'm going to show a video that highlights the 50th anniversary, and the play and the poem are featured in the video.
Hello, this is Priscilla James Thomas. I'm calling from Central Prison's Death Row. We wanted to say happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
Today's the day. Today is really the 50th anniversary. Exactly 50 years ago yesterday, Ram Dass spoke at Duke University. We told him that we had visited our brother-in-law at the federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana that summer. And on the way home, Bo said he wasn't sure how it would unfold. But he felt some kind of connection to people inside. So when Ram Dass told us, perhaps 50 years ago from right now, that he had been sending copies of Be Here Now into prison libraries throughout the country, was starting to get letters from people in prison, and was feeling somewhat overwhelmed, we offered to take his letters, and that was the birth of the Prison Ashram Project.
Ram Dass? Yes, we'd be happy to answer the letters. We're young, but...
We are committed, and I'm sure we could offer some helpful advice.
Absolutely, just simple stuff.
Dear Human Kindness Foundation, I have a question. How is it that the universe is unfolding as it should, and at the same time, I'm the creator of everything in my world? 2 people are dead because of me. Is that my having created this for myself, or is it the world unfolding as it should? Could you please explain?
And so it began. Letter.
By letter. By letter.
Dear HKF, I'm a formerly condemned man whose conviction was overturned. Can you imagine the pressures, questions, the fears after 20 years on death row? What do? I've never been successful living in society.
Dear HKF, I am super lonely and thinking crazy thoughts and scared of getting out. I've never been out of prison longer than a year, never held a job, never paid rent, never had a credit card. Hell, I've never done nothing. So I don't know where to start. I have my parole clothes, and that's it.
Dear HKF, my release date's in 4 months. I'll be living out of my car. Where do I go?
Where do I go?
Where do I go from here?
In this troubled world, we bend into the light of each other's hearts, generating and weaving the seeds of kindness. When I had no love, you gave me yours. When I was in darkness and total blindness, you gave me your human kindness. As we sit within our prison walls, built by choices and decisions we have made, now is the time, a time for change. Just one kind act bleeds respect like blocks building a staircase in our minds, climbing above the anger and pain, manifesting our own destiny of love.
I was able to make parole in 2008. I've done well, doing the right thing all the time, over and over again. Try to be able to just be of service to other people is a lesson I learned from you people. I sure appreciate that too. Thank you very much.
We're hardwired for connection. One of the deepest cruelties of incarceration is how it separates people from so many of the loving connections we need to thrive. For our 50th anniversary, it was really important for us to highlight the voices, stories, talent, and wisdom of people experiencing incarceration because they are the heart and soul of our community. They are here. There are so many voices here. So much spirit here. The heart of our work is about getting free, and the only way we get free is together.
The Human Kindness Foundation, there's a lot of heart. I've met so many guys in prison who don't have any family or friends to speak of, and it's like a family. You may not have a family of origin, but they're pretty good brothers and sisters for a family of choice.
Okay, so that was a really pretty version of stuff, right? Really polished, and that's how it all went. Super easy cheesy. Now I'm going to show y'all some of the mess. When I first got this job 2 years ago, I was most excited about this amazing archive that I thought I was going to inherit of 50 years of letters from prisons and jails, 50 years of artwork. And I didn't realize nonprofits, like who has time for that? Right? You don't. When you have 2, 3 people, some like really committed volunteers, you have time to answer letters, get them their books, try to figure out funding and make it through your life. Right? And so I found a lot of pieces. Which is what an archive is, right? An archive is having a lot of pieces and saying this has value. This has value enough that I need to organize it and use it in a particular way. And so that's what we did. I found we had amazing community volunteers. We have an amazing operations manager, Kristen Domaraki, and we worked to half of the newsletters were digitized. We worked to digitize all the newsletters since 1979. They're all on our website, as it's a video you just saw, and the full version of the performance and the full version of the play as well. But we digitized those. We digitized 1,000 pieces of artwork and changed them so that they weren't organized in a way that made sense at the time, and the time was 1983, but a way in which we could find it easier and people outside of the building could work to help us, because there's lots of people who want to help, but we had to make the work accessible so that we could work with volunteers. Okay, so I've been trained by some wonderful people in this room, and I've been trained to think a lot, sometimes overthink. So I overthought a lot of stuff of what does an archive mean and how to find like the best qualitative research analysis platform to work with students. And none of that worked. And in everything that I've ever done, you got to do functional, not fancy. And my life always returns to a spreadsheet. You can't beat a Google sheet. So when I started working with Leela's students in the lab in November of 2022, her very patient students suffered through a lot of searching until we got to this. And they had a very kind of simple but open task, which was to go through the 40 years of newsletters, specifically only look for writing that came from incarcerated authors or people who had formerly experienced incarceration. So those could be letters or other forms of writing, and just pick meaningful quotes, like just excerpt stuff that felt impactful. I knew we were going to work with Lyndon Harris with Hidden Voices to make a performance, but I didn't know what that was going to look like or what she wanted. And I will say creative people don't value spreadsheets. Okay, my creative people did not like my little spreadsheet, but it's going to come back and you're going to see it. Anyway, I knew we were going to work with Lyndon, and I knew we were going to do some kind of writing using the quotes and the artwork, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And so we worked together to create a process that we could work collaboratively. We worked together to figure out what the theming process was, how to define those themes. And so once we got to that point with the students from the lab, then that got us to this really great foundation for working with Story Plus. And under the leadership of the lovely Vina in the back, we had 4 wonderful undergrads from Duke and UNC graduate student who worked for 6 weeks this summer to create the early reflections, those first 8 reflections for the 50 Days of Kindness. And their job was to continue to pull quotes from the archive, the 40-year archive of newsletters, and actually now have students from Duke Justice Project pulling quotes from that same archive. So yeah, this just never ends, and just keep feeding me students and I will keep training them on basic qualitative research methods. This is what I do. But yeah, they picked quotes. They worked to find artwork that would accompany the quotes out of our 1,000-piece artwork archive. And they were amazing graphic designers and created templates. The task was to create 8 templates, and I think they created 12 that we could use for both our newsletters and social media. And so this is one of the newsletter templates. Our primary audience has always been an incarcerated audience. And so our content has always been directed towards that audience in what the content is and how it's structured. And so our primary way of communicating most frequently with that audience is through our newsletters. And so this was a format that worked with our newsletters, and each reflection has the same structure. There is a quote from someone who's experienced incarceration. There's a piece of artwork that someone has sent us who's experienced incarceration. And then there's a reflection that usually I wrote that is inspired from the quote and reflection questions. And this is a kind of collaborative authorship and a sort of, I'd say, a call and response that is core to who we are, what we do, and how we're working moving forward. But we also wanted to expand our audience. We're kind of a pre-Y2K organization in many ways. And so we're trying to expand our audience. And part of that was the students making wonderful social media templates for Facebook, for Instagram, for email blasts, because we believe that a non-incarcerated audience has a lot to learn from incarcerated audiences. And we want to really push out that wisdom to people who have never experienced incarceration. And so and I will also say, making things cute is not my strong point. These students made this stuff so cute. They made these reflective, adorable, and I was really proud of them, especially because they did something I couldn't. Okay, so we use these reflections as the foundation for the mindfulness classes that we do at Orange Correctional. So each class starts with a meditation that is usually a longer version of the reflection, and then we discuss the quote and the artwork, and then if we have time, we get to the reflection questions. We usually don't have time. I mean, they relate a lot to the quotes and to the artwork, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. You know, we talk a lot about worthiness, feeling like what it takes to feel like you're enough, that we all struggle with as human beings. We talk a lot about change and acceptance, about guilt and shame. You know, shame being I am bad and guilt being I have done a bad thing. We go all over the place. So we talk about class, we talk about race, we talk about capitalism, we talk about culture. It's a lot of fun. I love talking about race-based capitalism in a prison setting. It makes me really happy. So yeah. This quote, we talked about this quote. I had to shut it down 45 minutes after I was supposed to be out of the prison because this quote and the notion of masks was just like, everybody was spinning. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have a core self? Do I have a stable core self? Am I always changing? What does it mean to wear masks? Like in a prison setting, I have noticed when we talk about masks, but I would guess if we sat down and talked about masks right here, right now, it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it takes people to what is race? What is gender? What does it mean to walk through the world with a felony on my record? What do experiences of childhood trauma feel like? What is my reading of W.B. Du Bois? We went all of those places. People cried. A corrections officer started talking about his views of core self and some really wacky ideas of the Batman franchise. We went a lot of places. I won't bore you unless you want to have a drink. Okay, so then we're working to turn these reflections into a book. That would be a book, a year's worth of books for weekly reflections that would be called Together Apart and would have different writing as well and kind of expanded versions of these reflections, which gets me to Together Apart, the practice, and Together Apart, the performance. And the practice of Together Apart was born on North Carolina's death row during COVID. And a Buddhist resident and a Muslim resident got together and started thinking, what can we do to help the world from where we are? And they decided they were going to start sitting every Wednesday from 7 to 8, sending love and light to all suffering beings. And they shared that practice with our spiritual director, Sita, and she shared it in our newsletter. And now people in prisons and outside of prisons from Texas to Thailand are sharing in this practice. And this is really core to both who we have been and who we're working to be in the future. Because this is a practice that was born in prison, and the wisdom of people who were incarcerated was shared with a non-incarcerated audience and then made a spiritual community behind and beyond bars. And there's a call and response quality to it that I think exists within all of this work. So when we started working with Lyndon and Hidden Voices, we knew that that notion of Together Apart needed to be really core to the performance that she was going to make. And so she spent several months, she interviewed Sita, our founder, she went through the letters in our books and our newsletters, and she picked letters from each decade. And my spreadsheet came back because I was at rehearsals and I could see in different spaces, like, oh, this quote would work here, this quote would work there. And actually one of the reflections, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about us, is some of the last words of that play. So don't let people like knock you down on the creative capacity of spreadsheets. Anyway, what resulted with the performance, I think, was really a story about people struggling together about very difficult concepts, ideas, and realities. And it wasn't about like, hey, there's this letter and then someone's giving me this wise advice about life, but more someone's out there, like someone's listening, and there are ways to make connection, and my voice and my stories are worthy of being valued, of being shared, and being respected. That was the core of the performance, and it was first performed at our 50th anniversary celebration on December 2nd. And there were two guests at the celebration who also volunteer at Orange Correctional and lead a discussion and reading group. And so they brought the play to the discussion and reading group, and the 5 participants in the group decided they wanted to stage the play. And so they revised it, they turned it from 3 actors to 5, they practiced, they created costumes, they created props. And February 20th, they performed the play at Orange Correctional to an audience of 70 residents and community staff. And I knew most of the guys, and it was really powerful to hear when they were reading people's words from maybe 40 or 50 years ago, how those stories mirrored their own difficulties, their own struggles, their own triumphs, their own hard-fought wisdom. So it was really great. Okay, the final piece of work I'm going to share is Dancing in the Sky of Kindness, which is our collaborative poem written with 52 incarcerated authors and 1 poet laureate. And Jackie did an amazing, amazing, amazing job with this. So I just kind of saddled Jackie with my wacky creative idea, and she rolled with it, which was great. So we put a prompt out in our fall newsletter asking for poems in 50 words or less on the question, what does kindness mean to you? And Zero Cool was pretty cool with his response. So he says 56 words with title, sorry. But most people weren't that cool. And we got hundreds of pages in response. And Jackie picked words from every single author and wove that into a 10-minute poem. It's on the website if you want to watch the whole thing. It's incredible. And her words were like the scaffolding for the words of all the authors. And over 80% of the words came from incarcerated authors. And I really loved this project for a variety of reasons. First, it was the most immediately collaborative. And it really strongly had that call and response quality that I think is really important. We put a call out, and then people responded, and then Jackie responded. And now I'm working with students with Duke Justice Project to format the poem along with artwork, and we're going to send that to all of the authors, along with a copy of The Sentences That Create Us, which is a book on creating a writer's life in prison that PEN America's prison writing program puts out. So there's, a very immediate relationship that is built in that kind of work. And also the content, it's hopeful and hard at the same time, and it's wise. And I think that that's really part of the foundation of what we try to do, is create opportunities for people to learn from the wisdom of lived experience, from their own experiences and the experiences of others. And most of our greatest wisdom has come hard. It's come hard fought, right? It comes from hard experiences that we have through a process distilled into what does this mean? Why did this happen? How can I share this with others? How can I learn? This is not to glorify pain, because everything that hurts us does not make us stronger. Some stuff makes us weaker, meaner, and more dangerous to ourselves and others, and that's real. But in order to turn pain to wisdom, we need structures of support that help us to begin to make sense of what happened to us. And prison is exactly the opposite of that. Prison and jail they're traumatic places that house people who have experienced trauma, and oftentimes because of that trauma then end up being more traumatized. And until we no longer have prisons and jails in this world, it is our obligation to try and find ways that create structures of support that offer people opportunities for their own healing, for collective healing, despite where they are. And pain doesn't just hop over into wisdom. We need space, sense, structure, and story to get there. And we try to offer that in small ways in the work that we do. So with space, we need space and distance in order to get perspective from what has happened to us. In prison, that's really hard to get space. You have no freedom. And that's why we focus from the beginning on mindfulness resources, practices, and processes, and to say, where you are, you can find small spaces of freedom within you, as constrained as that is. And where you are, you can find some perspective in what has happened. And when you're able to do some of that, you're able to start making sense of what has happened to you. And that's messy. That is a process, right? And you need to process. And that's what a lot of the letters have been for 50 years, is people writing and trying to process, like, what is this that has happened to me? And processing oftentimes works best when you have a structure, when you have a container to hold that sense-making process. That container can be a letter. It can be a piece of artwork. It can be your memoir. It can be a book of your spiritual wisdom. It can be an NA or AA group. It can be our mindfulness group. But having some sort of structure and container, and ideally a structure or container that is collective and that allows us to put our experiences in context, it's really important. And then that gets us to a point where we can begin to tell stories that make sense to us and that we can share with others in a positive way. And when you see people sharing their stories of wisdom that they've learned, this is an incredibly healing thing to see and to witness, and empowering for both that person and the person hearing the story. And I want to say, oh wait, let me see. I'm about to start ranting. I'm trying to see if I'm ranting yet. I am not ranting yet. I'm hopeful still. So I'm with the next slide. Okay, this is a story about wisdom stories shared in one of our classes. And I love caterpillars. And I feel like nobody gets a tattoo of a caterpillar, but why not? We get so many drawings and paintings of butterflies. Everybody wants to be a butterfly, right? And we have only gotten one little caterpillar. Years, right? So, he looks like humble, smart, brown and green, like maybe not that exciting. But I was really excited about where this would go. And one of my favorite members of the class, he was super excited about this too. He was like, the caterpillar, that's my guy. I'm like, what you got? So I'm going to have to find this too. Sorry, because I won't do some full justice. Okay, cool. So he said he was at a prison years and years ago, and he was trying to get honor grade, which is basically getting more privileges in the facility that you're at. And he went to his case manager, and he was going to argue his case. And he walks in, and there's butterflies all over the room. He's like, I got a chance. She's like all hippie and new age, like maybe I got a chance. And he didn't. And she turned him down. And he said, that's your problem. You just want to skip ahead to the butterfly, and you don't see that I'm a caterpillar right now. So he didn't get honor grade, but he said, I told her what I thought. Everyone has a turning point, a moment where they can say, I'm not going to be the same as I was before. If you don't have a turning point, I don't believe you've really changed. You haven't really healed. I can say now that I love myself, that I look in the mirror and I know I'm a butterfly. But I wasn't always that way. I had to start off as a caterpillar. And this got us into this great conversation of like, why do we always want to skip to the butterfly? What does it mean to be a caterpillar? What does it mean to be in the cocoon? A caterpillar has to melt before it becomes a butterfly. A cocoon is butterfly and caterpillar soup with cells dividing to become a butterfly. And that butterfly exists within the caterpillar, and it exists within the melting of its existence to become something different, right? And we had this great conversation, and people were in like all these different states in their journeys, in their lives. Some people just trying to get space, some people trying to make sense, some people like in there for the structure, and some people like him sharing their wisdom stories. And this is so powerful when you see it. And this is something that's happening despite and not because of the fact that they are in prison, which I think is getting me to my ranting, but still it's hopeful because there are pandas holding the world, right? Because if you can't hope and be hard at the same time, why, right? And as my friend Craig Wally says, hope is an action. So hope has to be a verb. Yeah, so our criminal justice, our criminal legal system, and our prison and jail systems are systems that really do everything they possibly can to prevent creativity, curiosity, and creativity from flourishing. These are systems of disconnection, destroying the communities that we need to thrive, and making it really, really hard for healthy and nurturing communities to be built within a prison or jail setting. It is a system that is not very curious about who someone is, what has happened to them, why they did what they did, who they could be in the future. And it is a system that does not allow for very much creativity or collaboration at any level. This is from the level of the prison guard to the police officer, from the prosecutor to the judge, from the person experiencing incarceration to victims of crime. There are very few spaces for people to get together and creatively think about, what does justice look like? What does punishment look like? What does repair look like? What does rehabilitation look like? And that's why it inspires. So what if our justice system was made of communities of curious and creative people working together to get well? But in some ways, it is despite itself. What inspires me most is when I see people then be creating creative communities that are curious despite where they are, despite being in a system in which everything is stacked against that happening. People send us artwork made from the dye of M&Ms. People send us artwork made, drawn on the back of unanswered grievance forms. People ask us for resources to make their own mindfulness groups. People create spiritual community from death row during COVID. People find a way. It's like the rose growing from the crack in the sidewalk. But what if this was the norm instead of the exception? Okay, so I will end with the notion of revelation, not transformation. So a lot of people working in prisons and working in reentry really focus on the idea of personal transformation. And that's really important, and that has its place. And I'm really interested in what it looks like to look at people through a lens of collective revelation. And that means, you know, stripping the layers off of ourselves and others of pain and protection that we think make us who we are. It means looking underneath who we show to the world and who the world thinks we are, and to see the core of who we really are, and to say we already are everything we need to be. We just don't always believe it, and we don't always see it. So the work of revelation is being able to see yourself clearly, and to see others clearly, and to see you're already enough. You're already more than enough. And that's when people can start the process of freeing themselves. When they can see, I'm not broken or bad, regardless of what I've done or what has been done to me. That's when people are able to start to heal and begin to feel whole. And so I'd like to end with these words from Dancing in a Sky of Kindness that come from multiple authors and tell a collective story of this kind of revelation and the strength that lives within us all. If there was no shadow, there would be no light. A life force rekindled, the fires we've never lost, leaving embers to be born. Thanks. So you can find us the website, email. Yeah. I'm open for questions or just reading. So I'm cool with whatever y'all want. I've done my good deed. Yes.
Do they ever do best practices among prisons nationwide? I mean, they see something that works that they didn't expect to work.
Yeah, there's a lot of best practices that happen. And okay, I'd say that prisons and jails are so dislocated from each other. So even in the state of North Carolina, there are 52 individual state prisons, and there are, you know, easily 100 county facilities and multiple federal facilities. And so I think what happens a lot of times is you can have a facility that's doing amazing things. When I worked for the city of Durham, I did so much work in the jail, and I really looked towards like Cook County, because Cook County, for example, their jail is the head of the jail is a psychologist, and they have a ton of social workers and therapists on staff, right? Because they know that they're housing a huge number of people suffering from mental illness. And so it's like, let's treat this space for what it is and try to help people. And this is not saying that Cook County Jail is a great place to be, but that they have structured things in a different way. I mean, Pittsburgh has a whole kind of therapeutic healing pods. People do really cool things in different places, but you have to have like corrections officers and wardens specifically who are willing to implement those things. And I will say also that the process of getting projects funded through a federal or state structure is oftentimes really antithetical towards that creativity, curiosity, and community space. So it's hard to duplicate and replicate things, but that doesn't mean people aren't trying to do that, and that people do that to some extent. Yeah.
I wanted to ask the kind of historian's question, because you talk about archives a lot, and I had a question about, like, you know, it's been around for 50 years. Is there like an actual archive, like, of the stuff that's old? Because then, like the Rubenstein, like the Human Rights Archive here has some stuff like this. But I just wonder if there are boxes of this in a garage somewhere, like, and what would happen to those actual materials. And the other question is about, you know, the nature of the prison system has changed a lot in the last 50 years, and as you know, my sense is that things have gotten a lot more locked down in the last like 20 years. And I was wondering if you could share something about how that has affected y'all's work. Is it getting harder? Is it getting easier? Like, what's the kind of trajectory of the Human Kindness Foundation in that regard?
Yeah, those are two great questions. So the archive one, I went around a lot of circles. I started off in history before I went to anthropology. So, you know, I really thought, oh, we should digitize all of these because we do have filing cabinets and boxes, and we should digitize them and we should do something with them. And there's some real questions of consent there, right? Of and the content that is in there, and not wanting any content that could ever hurt someone. And you know, when people, it's almost like we're not therapists, but people are writing really personal stuff. And so I thought about it and I talked to a lot of people, and then I kind of chose my own inner expertise to say that it felt unethical to digitize most of the work. The work that I did digitize was work that either people had expressly wanted published or work that was already published. Yeah. And then also gratitude letters that we use for impact statements. So I'm going to use those as basically like qualitative data to show our impact. So it would all be like anonymous, but that's not really archived. So the artwork, what we have digitized, and it could be a lot more organized. So if anybody wants to write a project with their students to organize our work, we're down. It could be a lot more organized, but the artwork and the newsletters felt like the most appropriate places to make public. Yeah. And then your second question is quite a big one. And I would say that particularly when I took this job 2 years ago, I think that I know that the prison system and how we work within it was at a kind of a crossroads, because we had primarily been a paper-based organization, and that was a way, it was kind of a tried and true way. You know, people could get books, people could get letters. That has become so locked down, allegedly because of fentanyl. They say that there's a lot of contraband that comes in paper. The level to which that's true, or if that's true enough to close down mailrooms and close down libraries, I don't know if that's fair. But a lot of the content getting in now is, it either goes through tablets or it goes through third-party vendors. So different. So North Carolina uses text behind. So if you write a letter to someone in North Carolina, it gets sent to Maryland, right? Is that right? Yeah, it gets sent to Maryland, where it's scanned and then printed out and sent to that person, so that no one is touching the actual physical piece of paper. And that's been a huge change. You could have prisons or future prisons where you have one address to send a letter, one address to send a newsletter, and one address to send a book. And those might be all in different states. And so I think that first with fentanyl, whether we can discuss the level of truth to that. And then with COVID, there's a big push to just kind of saying tablets are the answer. So like the state of Texas, they moved their letters largely to tablets, and it took us months. So my guy PIK, my buddy, you know, I wrote him a letter. I'm like, I want to like make art out of your art and sell it and like give you money. Let's like work together. It took 5 months for me to get a response from his mother, because that's when his letter arrived. So I think COVID became this opportunity. And I'll say the tablets, when they work, can be really great, because you can provide a lot of programming, a lot of really cool content, a lot of ways to actually get into better communication with people. And then it just like doesn't always work, and it depends upon the facility. And I think COVID, because there are real huge staffing problems in all prisons and jails, then to bring programming into facilities, they're not going to allow people to come in if they don't have the staff to make that space safe. So a lot of programming has moved to tablets, for better or for worse, which is why we had to get some of our content on Adobe, which is not a solution at all. You know, it's in 350 facilities, and you know, we send materials to 9,000 facilities. So yeah, so it's in a state of flux, and I don't know, it will get worse before it maybe gets better. That's what I would say. but I'm hopeful and I've got pandas, so. Yes.
Pardon my ignorance, but could you go through the steps to use a tablet in prison?
Well, I mean,
You're talking about like, a little tablet the students carry.
yeah, but they're not like, they might look like a tablet, they're probably smaller, right? And probably have more cracks than my iPad does, but they're smaller, that you can't get online with them, right? So it's a like internal, not even internet, it's all apps basically. And so you can go to this app and be like, okay, here's 72 books, or you can go to this app and Calm. So like Calm is on a lot of different tablets, and the guys in my class love their Calm app. And the best like compliment I get, do you work for Calm? You sound just like that woman on Calm. So that's pretty fun. But yeah, it's just like an internally held apps on a tablet that does not have internet connection. Does that make sense?
What about censorship? Do they censor information that comes into apps?
It's an interesting question that I'm pretty curious about, because so we're in that kind of blurry space of change. I don't think they know all the content that are on all the apps, but they never know all the stuff that gets in. So it's just a different delivery mechanism. But yeah, they don't censor everything. They censor what they can, but they don't have time to go through the entire library of Calm. Yeah.
Just to add to that question, I'm corresponding with someone in Kansas prison, and he uses an app, and I go through service thing do this correspondence. But the thing is that there is a limit on character, and there's a limit on all those kinds of things. But it has made a dramatic difference to be able to even write literally every day. You pay $10, you can actually stay in touch every single day. There's no limit on, doesn't seem to be a limit on. It's just that character limit, And I sometimes wonder about the content question, because this friend sees all kinds of things. That when I say, wouldn't this sort of get you into trouble? And so far, so good.
I mean, I think that it's always in those spaces of overlap and transition are also spaces of opportunity, right? And so that's why it is always exciting when there are spaces of transition of what can happen and what can be created. And then it's also can be quite dangerous and disconnecting when it doesn't work. And then when things stabilize, we have a whole different kind of state of being and playing. Yeah. I'm sorry, there's a question. Oh, wait, I'm gonna let.
You can take just one more.
Okay, yes, Mark, and then I'm gonna let Leela finish a thought.
And sentences that create us.
Oh, yay.
And haiku gets you thinking in a different way. You have to use a certain number of characters. But you start to rethink how you see things, and you choose words, and you look up words to say, maybe, is this the right word? Is this the best word for that? But I'm thinking on the tablets, as I hear this, that you're restricted to certain character limit. That's actually could be a good thing.
I mean, creative constraints always can have their benefits. I'll say John Paul Lederach uses haiku as part of his conflict transformation practices. So I am a fan of haiku. Leela, were you going to say something? Well, thank you so much for coming.